Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today or whenever you're joining us. And Michelle Gibson joins us again today. Michelle, thank you so much for being here with me.
Thank
And
you, Carla. You're very welcome. Thank you so much for the invitation.
oh, you're welcome. I enjoyed our last conversation so much. And just for all you listening, we're not going to go into a lot of Michelle's biography and her story as much this time in detail. And you can, if you're interested in that, and I encourage you to do so, go back to the December 31st podcast where we cleared out the Gregorian old year with her podcast and listen to more of her story, the background of her perceptions and where she's coming from, and hear her story there. And so today, because it's Friend a Tree Week, that's what I established a couple years ago on every equinox, just to help people know that trees are sentient beings and their energy is made to heal us and help us. And if we can send our intentions through trees to broadcast them throughout the universe and further our intentions as part of how the universe works and how we're meant to be part of nature and how everything works in our favor, how the world is set up for that, even though a lot of times, like we will talk in a little bit, it doesn't seem like it was, or a lot of times in our own personal lives as it's happening, it doesn't seem that way. But so we're going to get in and talk today. We're going to start just about the giant trees that used to exist and the importance that of them still now, and of regular trees too. I meant trees that we have now, as meaning regular trees. And so, Michelle, take it away. Can you tell us how you got started on the giant trees? Did they show up in your research on ley lines? Is that how you learned more about them?
They did, but the way that I really got tuned into it was through Chad Williams of the Deeper Conversations with Chad YouTube channel. And Chad and I have been working together for several years now and seem to have a connection in doing this work. And at some point he said, Michelle, we need to talk about trees. And I'm like, okay. At that time, they were not on my radar. And so we did a conversation on his channel. And prior to that, he was sending me some of the videos that he was doing, looking into the trees and some other things. And I'm watching the videos and I'm like, wait a minute, we're coming from different places, but we're finding the same things. Mines and clay pits and brick making and insane asylums and amusement parks and all these things. And so when we had that conversation, as we were talking, we were finding the common ground, and I could see what he was saying about the trees. And once I saw that, I couldn't not see them. I mean, I live in Prescott, Arizona, in central Arizona, and it's hugely significant because this place was filled with giant trees. I mean, I'm probably a mile from Thumb Butte, which looks like a giant tree stump. Once you see it from that perspective, it's a perfect partial tree stump. Yeah. And it does have astronomical alignments where you'll see, I haven't seen them personally, but I've seen like banners and things like that, because Thumb Butte is like a symbol of Prescott, where you see the Milky Way over it. And that's the case with Arizona. I think it's the case with everywhere, that like the Earth is a star map, and it's not just the trees, which are now mesas and buttes and anything but a tree. I think volcanoes, I think we're talking about former trees. And so like even hereabouts, there's a lot of street names that refer to like Constellation Way and Moonrise Drive and all this other stuff. They're not just picked out of the air. They're referring to places where these astronomical alignments take place. And we're just completely unaware of this. And a researcher named Gary David has shown how Arizona is like the Orion zone. And so there's star maps of Orion in several places, kind of around here north where I live, and there's one in the Grand Canyon. You know, there was a highly advanced civilization here previously that knew exactly where everything was. And so my research of ley lines, basically, by tracking them, cities and places in alignment, and I believe according to sacred geometry, I was looking at places and seeing the same things, the same hand of design, same infrastructure, doesn't matter where it is. I mean, you could be in Tierra del Fuego at the tip of South America and see the same things that you see in other places. And then in tracking that, I saw this evidence of this worldwide unified civilization from ancient times to relatively modern. And then I saw the story unfold of how that got taken over and colonized, and in our narrative anyway, because I think the true story is even different from that.
Right.
I don't think it's anything like what we've been told, but that's how the story unfolded to me. So my research of ley lines took me into the whole big picture of how things got colonized. And so that's led me deep into timeline research and things like that. And who was behind that, you know. So, and a good place to start is like the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the DuPonts, the Astors, you know, the wealthy that kind of set up the new system after they took out the original system, which was a free energy generating grid that was worldwide. So they took that out. I think that was deliberately destroyed. And they brought in their new world. And when they destroyed the grid, they destroyed the surface of the earth. And that included the giant trees, in my opinion. You know, certainly anything we talk about is opinion. I have been researching for over 6.5 years. I've compiled a lot of data to support what I'm talking about. You know, I realize people are coming from different perspectives and different guidance about what actually happened here. This is where I've landed. And I started with sacred geometry, ley lines, and the Moors, the ancient humans of the earth. And they've gotten completely wiped from our minds, except for 700 years in Spain, essentially.
Wow.
And I'm looking at them as the builders of the worldwide civilization, but it's even more than that. We talk about the 12 tribes of Israel, we're talking about the same people. And their identity got taken by the Khazarian or the Rothschild, however you want to look at it. It got subverted like everything else. So there was an original positive civilization. These guys came in, they based it on the original civilization, but they subverted it, subverted the science and everything else, and gave us a brand new science. And I'm working on something now that I should have out pretty soon that will show how they took the original, like alchemy, which was how they interacted with the elements in order to create and beautiful things and create medicines and so on and so forth. And that got turned into like DuPont, where it's poisonous. That's just one aspect of it. And another aspect of it is around in the 1600s, and 1666 was a big year in our narrative. Around that time, the Royal Royal Society of London, the new science started to come in, and they were basically using the original information on alchemy and the ancient sciences and turning that into, from medicines, like healing things, into poisons. And so anyway, my research is looking at that aspect of it, and we can see it in the world today with all of the poisons in our air and the environment. You know, they turned the science into something for their benefit and actually something deadly. And
Absolutely.
and I think another aspect with the trees is I think they blew out the grid by a direct attack. And I think when they blew out the grid, which was perfectly tuned, we're talking cathedrals and
Mhm.
star forts, and this is all along ley lines, um, which are groom lines of electromagnetic energy, but it worked with frequency also, music. So it was scientific and it was a musical instrument. Everything was perfectly tuned, and I think they blew that out. Talking lighthouses, bell towers, organs.
Mhm.
Cathedral rose windows look like solfeggio frequencies, and the organs are like right up against them. So I think they were sending out healing frequencies. And so I think when they destroyed the grid, they destroyed the trees. I think that's what blew them out. And so, for example, as far as the ley line research goes, when I learned about the giant trees and I look back at ley lines I had tracked, especially islands, you look at the islands, they look like tree stumps in the water. And so I think
Mm.
when the
Mhm.
grid blew out, I think large portions of the landmass sank. And because there was a connection between like the giant trees and volcanism, for example, and I think the giant trees served a lot of functions, including the Earth's magnetic field, gravitational and
Mhm.
magnetic field. I
Mhm.
think they were part of that. And so when this new science came in, and Sir Isaac Newton, the year that he did the apple thing and observing gravity,
Yeah.
was 1666. And then so our whole scientific worldview is based on the idea of a spinning planet.
Yeah. Right.
The whole thing. Well, my research has taken me from not having an opinion to, yeah, we're not on a spinning globe.
Yeah. I agree. I agree totally.
And I didn't start there, and
Mhm.
it's not the focus of my research.
Mhm.
But again, you have to realize what we're taught in school, and it's the only thing we were allowed to learn,
Yeah.
is that we're on a spinning globe, and this is how we get gravity and all this stuff. I think the giant trees were responsible for that before. And like I said, they are showing up on the ley lines. And so I've talked about that in my work, and
Mhm.
then I'm going more into detail about this original civilization and then how the energy grid was constructed. That's where things are going. And I'm not just saying this for no reason. I mean, I've really
Right.
spent a lot of time researching all this stuff in detail, and the ley lines for me have been key to the knowledge that I've collected by blogging.
Mhm.
And then I do my research in the blog, and then I turn the blog post into videos. And that's just how I do this.
Mhm.
And everything that I put out is from a very sincere place. And this is how I've been guided. It's like this, my whole life has been leading me towards doing this work. And there is no reason for me to know anything about this. I was born and raised in a very conventional home. None of this was part of it. I'm still kind of an oddity in my family. I mean, there's just not anywhere. But I did make decisions throughout my life where, had I not made those decisions, I wouldn't be doing this now. And I was receiving information which informed me, and I was always interested in things that were hidden from us, in search of and unsolved mysteries when I was growing up. And I just, wanted to know what was behind the stories that were told. I guess there was a hunger that I had from early in my life, and an awareness and things that I would notice, and then people that I would meet. And so before we started, we were talking a little bit about divine timing. We're kind of in a crazy in between place right now, but I absolutely believe that we're coming back together as a collective into our hearts and into a higher awareness. And the evil behind what's been taking place doesn't want that to happen. And they've been working very, very hard to keep us from waking up.
Hmm.
And in spite of that, and there's certainly people that we know that are sound asleep.
Oh, yeah.
I know that's the case in my life. But it's happening anyway.
Hmm.
People wake up in different ways. I started waking up a long time ago. And this isn't happening as fast as I would like, but I do know for a fact that I made a decision to move to Sedona in 2017, that if I'd stayed where I was, this would not have been happening, the work that I'm doing. And that once I got here, I met the people and started having the experiences that I needed to be able to start doing this work and putting it together. I
Right.
had the information by 2016,
Mm.
but it took me coming here to start the divine timing and the people that came into my life and the experiences that I had to be able to really get it going. And that happened about a little bit over 2 years after I moved here. I needed to
Yeah.
have all those experiences. And again, without those experiences, I wouldn't be doing this. And so it's like right timing. So even though I want things to happen faster in terms of change and, seeing the craziness go away, it is a process. And I do believe in a spiritual side of our lives that we aren't aware of, guiding us. And I think with the work that you do, you're really tapped into that, to the spiritual side of this plane of existence, that my experience of it tends to take place in terms of synchronicities, being in
Hmm.
the right place at the right time, meeting the right people. And that's like happens all the time. And I'm like, that in itself is like a form of magic.
Well, it is absolutely. And I just want to insert for people like myself, I look back sometimes and I think, well, why didn't I know then? Why didn't I do something different? I rag on myself for not waking up sooner, even though I started back in 2003 or something, right? And so I was starting, but it was like, I rag on myself for not doing it sooner. But like you say, it's if I hadn't had all these experiences, I wouldn't have been moved to where I am and being doing what I'm doing and seeing it from the viewpoint I'm seeing it from. And I probably wouldn't have woke up at all, right? Or
Right.
wakened up at all, however you want to say it. And so I just want to say to anyone watching that gets discouraged that if you're seeking at all, right, if you're trying to tune in to know truth and to follow your heart and follow spirit, everything in your life will bring you to where you need to be. And um, and it's beautiful that it works that way.
Right. And that's certainly been my experience. It's been kind of interesting. It's not been an easy life, but it's been an interesting life. And it did exactly what you just said. It brought
Yeah.
me exactly where I needed to be. And I've got something coming out pretty soon. The short title is Finding Osiris. But as I was doing the research, which is a lot of old research, it's some new research, it's kind of reconfiguring things that I've already done, but it's like putting the puzzle together even more. And I'm, realizing that even when I was young, I was probably a teenager when I learned about Sir Thomas More, who in our narrative was an advisor to King Henry VIII. Now, I have my doubts about a lot of things, a lot of these historical characters now because of my research.
Right. Yeah.
But I referenced Sir Thomas More specifically in the work that I just did, but I knew to look into his story a little bit because I was interested in him when I was like 12, 13, 14.
Hmm.
And I was kind of a bookwormy kid. I was pretty mature as a young person. And so I would read these books on my own like Les Miserables and The Count of Monte Cristo. I was reading these books, I mean, like thick books. I even tried reading The Death of Arthur, which is part of what I've been working on, by Sir Thomas Malory. I was a teenager. I wasn't that old, and I was getting these books on my own. And I'm saying that now because it's coming back into the research that I'm doing now. And I only know to look there because I had that experience as a young person. I don't know where those impulses came from. I wasn't out going to parties. I was reading these books.
Yeah.
Go
Yeah.
figure. I didn't understand it. Look at the Mort Arthur, the original, The Death of Arthur, and I'm like, I can't understand this. It's in Middle English or whatever. It's like, oh, I'm going to take that back to the library. But it's like everything. Anyway, that I feel connected to this information long before I had any conscious awareness of what it was and why.
Yeah.
And that's an important point, because our true history is hidden away in these old books. They've encoded it in books from that time period, and especially around the 1600s. It's in Shakespeare. It's in Ben Jonson. It's in a lot of different books.
So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so where they've encoded truth, but they present it to us as fiction
Story.
or entertainment. But there's information to be found in there. But you have to shift your perception about what you're actually looking at and looking for.
So do you think that they were the actual people writing it, that was the years that they wrote it? Or, yeah. So it's like,
no, I don't. I don't. I think we've been given a falsified history, and that at some point it's fabrication, and at some point the beings that did this, and I see them as satanic, demonic, low vibrational parasites. And I look at the Jesuits and the Freemasons at the top of the list as to who gave us the new information. Probably others, but they're, like, to me, the likeliest falsifiers. Especially, Jesuits, but Masons too, because they weren't the builders of this. They weren't the builders. They took credit for it.
Yeah.
And I think they made it usable and livable so they could bring in their new control system, which has not been good for us. But, again, part of that goes in with the lies about what this place was like before and how advanced it was, and the role of the giant trees, which was part of this grid system here, and the free energy system. So when you look at roads, okay, so we call them roots, ROUTES, like roots, ROOTS. And I think that's what they were. And when the parasitic colonizers came in, they blew the grid out. They got up and running. They got things up and running, like the trains, the canal. Well, they got the canals running first, and then the trains ran next to the canals. When they got the trains up and running, they didn't need the canals anymore. And they have this crazy story that, well, we built the canals, which are massive masonry infrastructure, very highly sophisticated. We built the canals, but then when we built the railroads, we didn't need the canals anymore because it was so much faster and more efficient. But the reality is that was all part of the original grid system. So they got the trains up and running, and they cut down trees. So I would make a distinction between giant trees and much, much larger trees than we have now. So they get the trees up, the trains up and running. They're cutting down the bigger trees that were here before. You can find that in the historical record. It's there. They were mining, I believe they were mining the root system. So for coal, for iron ore, and things like that. Talk about minerals. Those were all part of the system too. So my feeling is like this grid system, all of the components. So if you look at your car, everything works together a certain way to get so that when you turn your car on, it drives. I think the Earth's grid system was like that. Everything was in a certain place for a certain reason, and the colonizers knew exactly where to go to start mining for the coal and drilling for the gas and so forth, because they needed a replacement fuel source to get this place up and running again.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was all free energy before that happened.
Right.
And all of this has been hidden from us deliberately. And it's not even, that's not even the worst part. They replaced it with us.
Yeah.
Because, you hear about all the places that had all the railroads that have been taken out and all the streetcars have been taken out. And I know just from where I live in Prescott, I've found pictures of the main Gurley Street where is on a utility box in the middle of the historic district, right across from the courthouse, big Greco-Roman building, are pictures of them digging out the tracks that were below the surface of the road. And then it only ran for 7 years. And it heads right to Thumb Butte. One of the places where I go shopping is Marketplace Depot, which is where the train station was. Fort Whipple is just down the road. So Star Forts were part of this too. But it's all been covered up. And so what used to be the rail infrastructure for the free energy is covered by asphalt. Now there's all this chaotic human energy going over it. And, the same thing with like rail trails. So a lot of hiking trails, recreational trails used to be railroad tracks. So instead of the free energy of the railroad tracks, you've got people walking and riding bikes and ATVs and all that kind of stuff. So they replaced it with human energy, by and large. They keep what they need for freight. A couple of like big cities have streetcars. They're needed. The same thing with like incline railways. There's a few left. In some places they're absolutely necessary, and those are like when car goes up as the other's coming down, it's a counterweighted system, and they used to be all over the place. And I think they're going to the top of a lot of places like their giant tree stumps. So that used to be part of the system that got taken out. But what I'm saying is this rail system was all over the earth.
So like on the rails to trails now, if you're walking, so I can see just by natural use or nature, true nature, and the ley lines and stuff, then it's pulling. Is that what you're saying? It's pulling in the human energy, or they're using the non-helpful electromagnetic frequencies to tap into us when we're on them, or
something like that, because we're energy beings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people can see auras. I'm not one of them, but you can take a photo of with Carillion photography or aura photography. You can see your aura. We're particles, and we're a wave.
Yes.
We don't know we're a wave. We don't know our power.
Yeah.
They're drawing on our source energy. They're parasites. They don't have that. They need that to survive and thrive.
Right.
They need our energy. And so not only are they taking our source energy, but when we work, the whole system is designed to keep us busy. We need to have our needs met. We need to pay bills. We need to be distracted. They're distracting us. They're lowering our consciousness with drugs and alcohol make it part of the culture. People get addicted to cigarettes. People get addicted to gambling. We're all being kept from our ability to connect with our higher natures and each other by
Mhm.
this new system that was superimposed to harvest energy. So they're harvesting our energy. They're harvesting all life because they're lower vibrational beings. So all the pain and suffering in our world is what they feed on, besides our and everything else that we're doing. So they're like, but their downfall is going to be their greed and their overreach and their cruelty. And as people become more awake and more aware as to what's really been going on here, they have to have our consent to do this.
That's what I was going to say. Even now, in order to pull off our energy or to use it, if we say no and we mean it with all our, I don't think they can take it. I really don't think they can use any of our energy for ill if we're saying no. I don't think, what do you think?
They can't do what they've done. And so they've tricked us into giving
Yes.
our power away.
Hmm.
You know, all caps is a
Hmm.
form of enslavement in writing,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Hmm.
among other things.
Hmm.
We think we're doing great. Make a good, have a good job, earn money. They've been stealing hand over fist for a very long time, and they can't do it. They can't do what they've done. They're criminals of
Yeah.
the highest order. And again, why has this been allowed to happen? Well, I think we had to hit rock bottom in order to come back into our wholeness and make the right decisions for the right reasons. But we have to know what's been going on to do that.
Right. You have
And
to
not
know
everybody
enough.
can,
Yeah.
yeah, not everybody can handle what's been going on here. It's really bad. In a way, I wish I didn't know, but I think I had to know in order to be able to do this work. So in terms of the human trafficking and all the bad things that have been happening to humans without us being aware of it,
Yeah.
especially children, but not just children. So anyway, I think people get the information when they're ready for it. And now it's just so much more available than it was with the internet and everything.
Talking about the human power and stuff, um, what about the orphan trains or the replenishing after the reset or after the old world? And I've seen a lot of indications that babies were supplied or shipped all over to rural areas or other population to resupply the population. Have That would be part definitely of using our energy, right, without our permission.
Right. Um, so the best way to, I got distracted.
It's
So
okay.
I'm sorry, could you rephrase it?
Sure. No, that's fine. No problem. Because I kind of interrupted you, and you were looking for something searching for something particular. So it was just in reference to our energy being used without our consent, and going back to the reset or the old
Right.
world after that, and then the orphan trains or you see pictures at the world fairs, right? About so many babies being sold in incubators and different things like that. And you see pictures of hundreds of children on trains in the middle of nowhere, it seems like, or whatever. That has to be part of, well, I don't think they use whoever the power that shouldn't be is, right. I think Hillary Clinton was famous for saying never let a good disaster go to waste or something like that. They use anything for multiple reasons. That's how they come up with what they're doing, because it fits so many of their needs. Or
So my belief, first of all, as I said earlier, I believe there was a deliberately caused cataclysm that destroyed the grid. It was a massive attack on the grid system and on humanity and the creator and creation by these satanic demonic parasites that need our energy. So they want to set up a system where they can always have it. And so I think that's what transhumanism is about. You know, the ability to put us in some kind of cyborg ultimately, so that they could have it forever. So when the grid was destroyed, the surface of the earth was destroyed, and I think we were much, much bigger. Everything was much, much bigger. And so in order to take everything over, they have to have our permission. So they had to set up a system to where we would agree to it, because we didn't know anything else. And so they had the ability to create little humans. And so we're much smaller. So you get the word like nursery. It's the same as for plants as for babies. And so I think they were genetically engineering us and socially engineering us, because so many people had been killed. Now, I don't think everybody was. So there is underground infrastructure. I think they survived underground. I think humans survived underground. But a lot of the Earth's surface was destroyed. So at this point, I'm even questioning the oceans that we know today as having been like, I think it was more like Pangea or, you know, supercontinent up until this happened. And so they needed to repopulate. And you can see pictures on the internet. I mean, you can see places being dug out.
Right. Oh, yeah.
You can just type in mud flood. You know, they show these bowler hat guys or whatever. These big cities are huge cities and little teeny tiny people on the street and hardly any people there. But these gigantic cities like Paris, those pictures are available to find. And so they needed to repopulate. And I think the 19th century, I think things were far, far worse than we can even imagine. Because you look at the insane asylums, and they were using these old world buildings that were huge, you know, capacity for like 4,000 people or whatever. And they did not build them. They say they did, but they didn't. You know, they were using the grid. They were using buildings on the grid. Everything was placed for a particular reason, and geometrically. And so they were using what would have been part of the free energy system, housing these people and doing God knows what to them. And they may have been nonconformists, but who knows at this point? I mean, they could have just been survivors. And doing ungodly things there. I mean, concentration camps didn't just happen in the World War II. They were in the insane asylums, and they were doing tortuous kinds of things, you know, lobotomies and electroshock and waterboarding. And I mean, and that information is available to find. I mean, there's a Glora Psychiatric Museum at St. Joseph's. There used to be an insane asylum in Missouri. You can look it up, Glora Psychiatric Museum, and you can see what they did. I'm not going to go to a psychiatric museum for any reason. No, but again, doing the research, it's like, you know, it was horrible. Whatever they did here was horrible. And it's no wonder it's taking a while for people to wake up.
And then so many of the tunnels or catacombs right under the large cities or under the large buildings are lined with bones, right? So it makes, and then some pictures in the old buildings, it's like, you know, you have a face of someone and their hand is holding a heart or whatever with a bite taken out of it or something like that, right? So were they cannibals taking our energy that way? Right.
They do. They do. They do. I mean, I follow a lot of alternative information on social media. I haven't watched mainstream. I couldn't tell you. It's been a very, very long time. But the rituals that are done involve that kind of thing. Glands, adrenal glands,
Oh, well,
pituitary.
yes, the adrenals for sure. Yeah. And that's kind of
Pituitary.
the current days. I guess that's how it's playing out now. Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
So yeah, it's not just our energy bodies, it's physically too.
Yeah.
And
You can't.
so they've set the system up. I think the orphan trains were early child trafficking. These kids, so it started in 1854, Charles Loring Brace, and they sent one load of kids to Michigan, to Widgeack, Michigan, and decided, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. In the next 75 years, they're sending kids. They would go to like opera houses, community centers, line the kids up. That kind of thing is still happening now. I mean, people can order kids online. I don't know if you've heard of that. There's ways for child trafficking where they can look at kids and say, I'll take that one.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's really bad. So again, we're in that uncomfortable in between time, but I think the system is being dismantled. I think it has been. This has been going on for a while. I do not see it continuing, and I do not see evil winning.
I
And
love. Yes, but it was one of the most recent my lunch break things that came out, vids that came out, and he types into the chat GPT, to see what information it shares about stuff. And he's done it so often, or so many people are doing it so much, to find stuff that chat GPT is now agreeing, saying this doesn't make any sense. It says you should be able to do this with that information, but it doesn't make any sense. It shouldn't. It's not that way. We don't know how it is, but
yeah. So anyway, I think the main thing, like what you're doing with your show, Carla, and anybody that is taking the initiative and getting out of comfort zone, you may be doing that. I know I'm doing that. I'm a very quiet, introverted person. I like my privacy, but I feel like I've got to do this. It's not even an option not to do it. And the deeper I go into it, the more information comes back. And so all of us that are doing what we're guided to do and doing our parts and getting out of our comfort zone is contributing to this awareness. And I will always encourage people to do their own research, not just go with what any one of us says, but to just think for yourself and think critically. Hey, just like you said, this doesn't make sense. Because they've lied to us about everything, and it's all around us, especially in the bigger cities, but it doesn't matter. Prescott's not a big city really, but it's here. I mean, it's like where the old world meets the old West. And so we've got the narrative of the cowboys and the shoot 'em ups on Whiskey Row and all that stuff. And it's surrounded by beautiful brick architecture and Greco-Roman architecture and the massive courthouses in the center of the town. And it's a really hilly place, so it's like every time I leave my house, it's like, what am I looking at? And I think the surface of the earth looked like that. And I think the reason that the courthouse is on the flattest place here is because it's the weight of it is holding it down, and everywhere else is like a waveform. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
Well, it makes me I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, about how everything is laid out, and you've got these houses on top of a hill with these gigantic rocks in the front yard in the historic district. Go on Park Avenue, I make a right outside of where I live, and I drive up the street, and it's like, it's high, and then there's high and low on either side with the roads going up and down, and these houses sitting in impossible places. It's like, what happened?
Interesting. But yeah, I'm learning feng shui as not from the perspective of becoming a great interior designer or anything like that, but as an extension of my biofield. Yeah, because the houses carry our energy, and as a continued way of learning about how the universe works, right, and how to connect with spirit in there and inner healing and things. But your feng shui uses a lot of things of a placement. The ancient feng shui does, of where you place your homes around those buildings, for certain effects. Like one should be on the north behind you, and then smaller ones on either side, or something for different reasons of protection and sunlight and different things. And so I'm guessing the builders, right, the original old world people, took advantage of those,
I have no
right?
doubt about it. I think in everything, and my belief is that it was like humanity was in Christ consciousness. That we were
Mhm.
at that time, the ancient humans are much bigger, and you see that with buildings that are much larger than normal people, our
Yeah.
normal people would build. Ancient statues of Egyptian figures outside of these massive statues outside of massive temples. Um, I think we were much bigger and knew who we were, where we were, had that connection with our creator. And and I really see Earth as like the kingdom of heaven on earth, where everything worked together perfectly. And we were at that level of consciousness, and it really was beautiful. And we were perfectly aligned with what's going on up in the heavens.
Right.
And that's
So
becoming clearer and clearer to me, that this place was just amazing
it was
in
it
terms
was
of
meant to be
its
that way,
perfection.
right? Yeah,
Yeah,
it was meant to be that way. We were meant to be happy, right? It was
exactly.
meant to be a life of ease. And
Exactly. And that's the thing with like the trolley amusement parks. So the trolley amusement parks were part of the grid system too, but they were amusement parks, and they used to have trolley cars. And so there's like 13 out of thousands that aren't trolley parks, but they're still parks. But again, they were destroyed too, by and large. They were um, destroyed by fire. Um, nope, that's not safe. Too many deaths here. We're going to take this park out. But they were having fun
yeah.
with whatever was going on with the energy grid. They were having fun. And so, like, I think, and I see the trolley parks as being like a way of recharging, because they were on the ends of streetcar lines. They were terminals of streetcar lines. So I think
So
there was
people would
some
go
kind of
there.
function.
They People would go there not just for happiness, but because they were being happy, it was recharging them
I
and the
think it was probably
energies.
both. It's like cathedrals. I don't think people were going to listen to a priest or a preacher. I think they were going
Right.
to vibe together. I think the
Yeah.
cathedrals were like healing places.
So go hang on to the cathedral and then the trees. I mean, I see you kind of indicated that the you think the trees and the cathedrals then existed at the same time, the giant trees and
Yeah,
stuff. I had always, I guess, just assumed that the cathedrals were built after the trees were gone to take their place or something. But I can see
I think they
that
work together.
people were so in tune to each other, right? That it was all working together.
I
Yeah.
think it was all working together. And the other thing is, I think there's two different kinds of giant trees in our world today. So I think there are the ones that were blown out, and that we're told are buttes and mesas and volcanoes. And I think there were the trees that were symbiotically working with this infrastructure. So like in a lot of places, you'll see like a castle on top of what looks like a tree stump.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think they were using that energy. So I think there's a couple of different examples of what was going on with the trees. But I think we don't know about them because they don't look like trees anymore. Whatever we've got
Mhm.
going on in our world, what trees? You've got to be
Right.
kidding me. That's stone. That's not a
Yeah.
tree.
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
but I think, again, here where I live in Prescott, I mean, I think this place is surrounded by what used to be giant trees, and it's kind of deserty. Um, North of here in Flagstaff, which is at a higher elevation, you get more of the pine trees and things like that. But it's still, lots of deserty kinds of things here. I think that was blown out. I don't think it was like that always. I think it was green. And there are places where you see that. You see the trees and the parks and everything. So it's not all one way or the other. It's like a little bit of both. But I think in the old world, it was all there. There were no guesses. No
Hmm.
guesses about who we were, where we were, what was going on here. And then you get into our narrative and the stories don't make sense and don't add up because we're
Hmm.
told we were low technology, we're building all these massive buildings, we're building all this rail infrastructure, we're building all these tunnels. How, if we
Hmm.
if we didn't have the tools when they said they were being built, and again, you've got the internet to show pictures of these massive buildings and the streets are covered with dirt or horse and buggies, things like that. So again, it's really looking at things with a different perspective, different eyes, not and
Hmm.
questioning the narrative, not accepting what we're told blindly.
Right.
And when you start
Mhm.
doing that, then you can start peeling back the layers to try to figure out what actually is going on here, what happened here, and we're not going to get out of this situation by the same level of consciousness that created it. We have to, it's hard to not go into judgment. Really hard.
Yes. Yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
really, really hard. But I think that's all part of the process of our spiritual awakening and growth. And it's been my understanding for a while that as people do the inner work and raise, our own levels of consciousness, it's like the 100th monkey, and it not everybody has to wake up for us to raise our consciousness into
Yeah.
love, into the heart. Because the brain is, by its very nature, the brain is polarized with the left and the right hemisphere, and we get into
Hmm.
thinking, and the heart's actually our main center, our main
Right.
connection,
Yeah. I'm
our main
gonna.
biofield.
Yes. Yes. I'm looking at the chat here. Just a second. I'm gonna. I attributed a quote to Hillary Clinton, and thank you, Jay. She says it's Rahm Emanuel. She thinks it said, "Don't let a good crisis go to waste." So, and I just heard Hillary say it. And then another, thanks, Jig here. She's talking about a huge mine west of Prescott. Um,
There's mines all over this place. Um, you get to Charlotte Hall, which is like a museum. So like Prescott was founded in 1865, was the first territorial capital. Um, and there's like a train at the gate. There's signs of the railroad history through here, but you'd never know it. There's
yeah.
no trains, but they talk about the trains coming in for the mines. So they've been mining this place for quite some time, and it, that's like I said, they've been mining the grid, the energy grid. Um, I just can't wait for our next phase. I really am ready for this to be over with, because the more you wake up, it's like the harder it gets, because I know I see more every time, and it's been harvesting everything. I had a Planet Fitness membership for a little while, and then it came to my awareness that these fitness centers are on ley lines,
Mm.
I can't help but think, okay, we think we're doing something good by exercising, but I think they're
Uh,
harvesting that too. And one of the
oh,
things
wow.
that tipped me off to that is that I was part of a gym in Cottonwood. Now the equipment at Planet Fitness, which is called Matrix, doesn't have this, but the equipment in Cottonwood did. And after I got off my favorite elliptical or whatever I like to use, it would say, you've generated enough energy to power X. And I'm like, why
Oh,
would you tell me that? They
interesting.
just deeper you go into it, it's like, oh. And then I really liked, I was a black
Mm.
card member. I really liked the massage equipment, the hydro and the um, massage chairs. And I was using that probably more than anything else. And then I go in one time and like, oh, well, the system's down. It's what the Wi-Fi is down. Thinking, powered by Wi-Fi. Okay. So anyway, there's just indicators there that, things aren't what they seem. And that
Mm.
again, they're doing things with our knowledge and consent that have to do with our energy.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Just an
makes me,
observation.
yeah, and um, when I think about the old world or whatever, and all the lies and the different layers of lies, and it's like, how do you find out where it really started, or when? What's your idea of when the timeline happened of the trees being blown out, say,
So,
or yeah.
okay, so this happened relatively recently. So the timeline that I've identified is between 1492, which was the year of the fall of Granada in Spain, and 1942, which was 3 years into World War II. On either, so that's a 450-year period. At 225 years, the mid-year is 1717. So there's 225 years on either side. So that's the
Okay.
timeline that I've identified and done a lot of research around. And what I think they did was they superimposed this new timeline on the existing infrastructure. So even though in our narrative there were still things happening, interesting things happening right before 1492, and certainly after 1942, I think those are the years, which is like a figure eight time loop, that they
Mhm.
superimpose this new timeline and occulted our world. And so they've used numerology. They've used the higher sciences and they've inverted it for binding and spellcasting and things like that. And I think that's what our
Mhm.
timeline, the Gregorian year, is about, is ritual, things happening on ritual dates, like being on a hamster
Mhm.
wheel. You know,
Mhm.
um, so and I think time is cyclic. Um, the the older calendars are based on cycles, and it's also my understanding that past, present, and future is all happening at the same time anyway. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so 1717 was the year that the Premier Grand Lodge of England was established, and so my belief, based on for a lot of reasons, is that the original Masons were Moorish Masons, operative Masons. The Grand Lodge itself, the Premier Grand Lodge itself, says they're speculative, meaning they speculative. Um, they didn't build it. The operative Masons built it.
Mhm.
And a lot of stuff around founded and
Mhm.
Freemasonry and stuff like that.
Right.
So I think they used the ancient sciences for occulting. Um, a lot of people look at numerology and things like that. All the things that can be used for divination or whatever. There's positive and negative is how you use it. Because, like I said, intention.
Mhm.
What's your
Right.
intention?
Yeah.
So the original intention for the civilization was positive. The colonizers came in and they put a negative intention into everything. And so so my opinion is that they, before a certain point, and then we could say 1717, but it's somewhere in there. You know, like I said earlier, 1666, the 1660s was a big decade, but especially 1666. And then at some point, it's backfill based on, you know, probably real characters and things like that. And at some point, the controllers wrote themselves into it.
Okay.
And things were probably happening. But like, for example, the Civil War, I am really quite sure that the Civil War had more to do with covering up the original civilization or killing survivors, something along those lines, and not at all what we're told.
Well, the same way, because you were talking about 1942 being the closest, you know, the end of the eight, right, of your figure eight of the timeline, and that was World War II starting in, or you know, close to that, and so that also would have been similar reason, right? Probably to help the narrative in different ways
and destroy the civilization. I mean, modern warfare, all that stuff around that is again, it's not for what we've been told. You know, it's been manipulated. Everything's been manipulated. And, you know, again, you can look at the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and the Astors and the DuPonts and, you know, all those names, the Illuminati families, the bloodlines. And when you start looking at individuals, you find a lot of stuff out too. You know, names like even Clara Barton and Florence Nightingale and, you know, Dorothea Dix.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of information to be found in the biographies of these historical characters that you would not think to find. And so let's use Clara Barton as an example. So when it was established, and off the top of my head, I can't remember the year, but let's say sometime in the late 1800s, within 4 months, let's say, I think it was like 4 months, was the Great Thumb Fire in Michigan. It was like the first disaster that the Red Cross responded to. All kinds of shady stuff in that story. And one of the founding committee members was like the congressman for that area. And really weird things associated with the fire, like this, you know, yellow glow to everything. And then the Johnstown flood. Really shady stories about that. All these, you know, industrialists and millionaires, Andrew Carnegie and Henry Clay Frick from Philadelphia, among many others, that were part of this hunting and fishing club. I want to say it's South Fork, above Johnstown, and that Henry Clay Frick was responsible. It says it, if you look for it, for the alteration to the dam that caused the flood, the Johnstown flood, which was horrific.
Yeah.
Caused lots and lots of damage. And they were never held accountable, even though the flood originated from the South Fork Dam, which was associated with this hunting club. And this guy was named. And then they used the Johnstown flood in world fairs and exhibitions and things like that. And it's like, come see the horrors of the Johnstown flood. You know, so they're seeding all of the suffering into the narrative, into humanity by these disasters.
Right.
And so I'm not even sure is a real natural disaster at this point.
Yeah.
Or
well,
otherwise.
Yeah.
Any kind of disaster I see as having been artificially caused. Hurricanes and tornadoes and earthquakes.
We know those happen. Yeah, we know for sure. And someone in the chat here is asking about the Philadelphia experiment, because that was pretty close to 42 or 43, wasn't it?
I honestly really believe the Philadelphia experiment was part of what happened here. And I've spent a lot of time on researching that. I've had an intuition about it for a while, and then I started finding physical evidence. And Aleister Crowley was involved in that, and he's a bad guy. And I really think they brought in the demons the satanic elements when that happened, and is the origin of the craziness that we see today playing out, the gender ideology and things like that.
Oh, wow. So you think, of course, in history, you probably won't find anything about it, right? And people poo-poo that it even happened, or or whatever. So obviously, you think it happened the way I can't remember the man's name that wrote the book or talked about it, right? Several years later, how it happened. But
so I think it was a ritual ceremony that took place. Peter Moon has done a lot of research on the Philadelphia experiment, Montauk Project, and Aleister Crowley, and that was where I first learned about Aleister Crowley. He's done time travel research and things like that, and so before I started doing my own research, I had picked up that piece of the puzzle by reading some of his books, and so and in one of his books, he said we were knocked off our original timeline. I'm like, what? Because I had learned about ascension and higher consciousness, unity consciousness right before that. So like 2012 was like, oh, okay, everything's great. And then between 2012 and 2016 was when I started learning how dark the dark is. And so I've researched extensively, and I do believe that there's definitely a connection with all of that and what's happened here. But I'm also leaning towards there was probably other attacks on the grid, because there's so much damage to the surface of the earth. I think there were likely some kind of nuclear attack, some kind of directed energy weapon or something. And that evidence is available to find. It's just and I found it on long ley lines, but it's, there's places like the Sahara Desert is just a mess. Look at it. It looks like, especially on the western side, but just all the way across, it looks like there's a river of sand that's flowing down. You've got the eye of the Sahara, which looks like a bullseye. It fits the description of Atlantis. I think Atlantis was this name, civilization. We're talking the same. It's all the same.
Right.
This advanced civilization. And then like the Thar Desert in India, where the Indus River Valley civilization was, they've talked about that being radioactive there, and that place is just, there's just these deserts I don't think were deserts prior to a major attack on the earth, and that they resulted from that. But we're taught that, oh no, this is a natural process, that desertification, they say the same thing with like the ice ages. This happened millions of years ago, and change has been gradual and not the same processes over time, and this is just over time, and they just completely discount anything about catastrophism causing changes on the earth. And so they use the same basic, oh, this is natural, this has been going on for millions of years or thousands of years. And I've done enough research along ley lines and seen lands that are swamps with a history of railroads going through them and things like that. I think the land sank, turned into swamps, deserts, and dunes around this free energy grid system. And then they came in again with stories. Oh, we built this railroad through this swamp in the 1850s or whatever. And again, the stories are just fall flat when you look at them.
Well, you were talking about the stories of the Old West, right, out in Arizona that you hear, and I grew up on them too. My family were farmers, lived out in the country, and it was like my grandparents read Westerns. Well, I should say my grandmother did. My grandfather refused to read fiction at all. And but it's like, it makes me doubt some of my own lineage that I've heard of. Like, where did it start? Like my grandpa's stories or his grandparents' stories? At what point did it get changed? I wonder.
I have some ideas, but You know, I'm supposedly a descendant of William Brewster, who was on the Mayflower.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Was there a Mayflower?
I'm one of those families that has, you know, documented genealogy going back. I have that on both sides of my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked to people, I'm like, you know, I don't know who they were, or my grandfather was an orphan or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think I think this is a highly sophisticated deception. And I have found research about heraldry and the College of Arms and things happening in the reign of King Henry VIII. And I think they created a new nobility from the old nobility. And I think the old nobility was very ancient. I don't separate out the 12 tribes of Israel and the Moors and Atlantis at this point. I think that was part of the original legacy that got hijacked by the satanic Illuminati families, and they became the chosen ones, and they became, you know, elect of God or whatever, while they're trying to bring in a completely different manager to the system.
Right.
You know, they want to replace the creator of the universe with their version of it, and that's not good for us.
Right. And whenever there's a upheaval of people, say like the children or the babies being sold or moved out to other places, um, I see in my work with ancestral clearing, um, if people know their grandparents or great grandparents or great great grandparents and know some of even the stories that were told about it, right? And the names of the people, um, the connection is so much more vibrant between those ancestors. And the I don't know if the clearing of the old patterns within us is any different, but our bond with the ancestors is much greater. And but there's many of the clients that don't even know their grandparents' names, and it's no fault of their own, right? Some it might have been adoption, some it might have been just because the family moved, or because there was rivalries or not getting along with the mother with her mother, and so the children didn't grow up with those grandparents. And um, I don't know. I see the bond and the connection of knowing the ancestors, and so it always is kind of saddens me when I see that people weren't able to have that bond as they grew up in many ways, right? And then I think of the old world ancestors. Gosh, if we had that connection with them now, and really we do in our biofield, as screwed up as whatever stories it is and timeline it is, we have the ancients that we're descended from within us, even if we're genetically modified, right? In some ways, right? There's still DNA within us. And I'm curious to go back further. I've had connections with some ancestors that were present when the trees were cut down or blown out or whatever happened to them, and closer. And I don't know. I just think ancestors and our connection with them in the old world of what we have, like, are just beginning to find again, is so interesting and important too.
Absolutely. And because truth has been removed from our world and our awareness, we have to find it in unconventional ways. And we all have different gifts. I would love to have a gift like yours, but I don't. I have whatever it is that I have, which seems to be intuition and just a lot of synchronicity, and good research skills. And anyway, I can pretty much put together what I'm finding in an understandable way. but we all have different connections and different gifts to this information that really wants to come back out. And
Absolutely.
now's the time that it's happening. There's so many things prophesied for the time that we're living in now. And it's good. You
It
know,
is.
the
It's
things that
exciting.
are prophesied are good. And so in spite of everything they've done to us, we're still waking up. You know, they couldn't mess up all of us.
I know, what a relief, right? Yeah, it's like
Exactly.
it's
As
it's
hard as
like
they tried.
the rules of the universe, right? They have to tell us what they're doing, even though we don't know that they're telling us. But we have to be told somehow.
Right.
It just takes us figuring it out. But also at the same time, they can take all our energy, right? But it has to be at our
We have to
willingness by
willingness to do it.
default, at least, right?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So they set up the system where we willingly give them our energy because we don't know any better.
Right. And so but they couldn't destroy us completely.
Right.
That had to be part of the rule. Like something had to exist that carried through so that we could find out now.
Right. They had to do it this way because they had to have our consent. They couldn't just come in and do what they've done.
Yeah.
They had to have our consent because we don't know who we are, but they know who we are as
And I
sovereign beings, as
yes.
fractals of the creator. They know who we are.
And what I find in the biofield, I'm not the originator of finding this, and other people do different work on it and things to clear it. But I heard it called it's a bond of stream of energy that forms around the navel area. It's sometimes referred to as the slavery yoke. And what I have found from I do spiritual hypnosis and meditation and stuff to try to tap into the ancient knowledge. And it's like we agreed. We aren't born with that yoke, but it forms before we're a year old, and it's part of that ancient agreement of our of timeline. So our ancestors at some point agreed, right? And so this happens to us until we decide we don't want it anymore. And so maybe as more and more people become aware and the slavery yoke is removed from a lot of people or whatever, and then maybe eventually then children won't get it by the time they're one, right? If more and more generations are more knowledgeable, and maybe they'll be trained from the womb not to accept it or something, and it'll disappear.
I think we're living in a time where there's more light coming in. The Schumann resonance and vibrations raising naturally because of wherever we are in time in the universe. Are you familiar with Dolores Cannon's work and the 3 waves of volunteers? I identify as like a second waver. So so the older volunteers, I think, had it the hardest because it was even more rigid when they came in. But
Right.
then the middle group came in, which just kind of things happen naturally. So I talk about intuition and synchronicity. I don't hear things, I don't see things, but the intuition's strong and the synchronicity is strong. And then the third wave is like the crystal kids. And they come wired for this. And they've been heavily targeted by this horrible system that we're in. And so, but they already have it. They already have the DNA and the connections for this this evolution of humanity. And so, I just wanted to point that out. It's like,
Interesting.
it seems like with this being known, and the ones behind all the bad stuff knew that we were going to wake up. So they have to tell us what they're doing. So they tell us in movies and books and things like that. But but they've done everything they can to try to prevent it from happening, but they can't. And so it's just the awareness and not giving in to fear, because we create, we're such powerful creators that we can create an outcome that we don't want.
Yes.
And so it's just really being aware of our thoughts and our actions and things like that. And I'm not speaking as somebody that's perfect at that. I'm not. Far from it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
but
me either.
but it seems to work out okay anyway.
Right, right. The
But I feel like it's like I feel like I found my path, even though it would seem to have been impossible to find it, kind of like a needle in a haystack, because it
mhm.
wasn't in my upbringing. But I found it anyway. And so I feel like I'm doing what I came here to do, and I feel supported by the universe in the work that I'm doing. And
Yeah.
whatever that means. I feel like it's coming through me, it's not coming from me. I'm like the well-prepared vessel that can process the information that's coming through me intuitively and synchronistically.
Yes,
And,
I
and
totally feel that way too. There's someone in the chat commented, Kyra says, the galactic rotation of our system is 240 plus million years. An event happened that blossomed most life forms CMT. I'm not sure what CMT means. Event. And we are completing that rotation, give or take, and the energy grid will bloom again.
there's one of the cool things about the awakening right now is that there's a lot of people that are connected to the ley lines as healers.
Mm-hmm.
And so my connection seems to be finding the ley lines and researching them. But there's a lot of people that are consciously intending to heal the ley lines, which really need healing, because so many
Yes.
bad things have been done on them. Wars and terrorist attacks, and they maximize
Yeah.
the lower vibes of whatever act of violence on the ley lines. So more
Yeah.
people are becoming aware of that and the need for healing them through their conscious intention.
Yeah.
And
I
there's
know.
more and more people that are doing that.
I'm tuning the ley lines every day now. I think it's been over 6 months since I've been doing so.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Glad to hear it.
Feels good. I also started more recently. A friend gave me a tensor ring. It's Slim Sperling was his company had made these, but so I'm speaking some of those intentions of my intentions, or those what I call spirits intentions, what our souls all want for the highest good of the universe, right? Speaking those through the ring to amplify and empower them, the intentions more. Kind of like sending them through a tree.
Yep.
So.
So we've got all kinds of tools at our disposal, spiritual tools. And again, a lot of times it's just a willingness to be open to new ways of thinking and new ways of doing, and open the box, not stay in a box of thinking. Because one of the things I found is, in order to receive information, you have to let go of everything you've ever believed to be true. And then you can start to get new information and see things a different way. And try not to judge our experience or somebody else's experience and how they get that information. I can't explain the synchronicities and the intuition in my life other than I'm grateful that I have that. And but I'm truly amazed just that it even happens with the regularity that it does, and glad.
And the more you follow it, the greater increase of those synchronicities, right? Because just your intention of looking for them or expecting them is bringing them closer. It's awesome how the universe works, and to think if all of us, as the world, like the old world was, if they were all tuned into this and we could be again, it's like mind-blowing how wonderful life could be, right?
Right. And kind of along those lines, with as bad as everything is, these daily miracles still happen. You know, we're still being
Yeah,
communicated with by
yeah,
spirit, whether in the form of the synchronicities and the people we meet, or one of the things that um, I learned to do over the years is if I see an animal that's unusual that comes into my awareness, I'll look up the meaning of the animal, and sometimes that has good information in there. I'm not the kind of person that follows astrology, but I've had my astrology chart done professionally about 5 times.
mhm,
And that information has been very helpful in understanding me, in me understanding me and my gifts and where I struggle. Um, and so there's a reason that they're there. And again, sometimes it's just a matter of just being able to think differently or shift perception or understand. Um, and again, not to judge either a book by its cover, or we've been taught, we've given a set of good and evil, and we have to be discerning. And again, intent is the most important thing. What is our
yeah,
intent? And what to be aware of. um Even with numerology, if you look at angel numbers, 111, 222, 333, 444, 555, 666,
mhm,
777, they each have a meaning. So much evil has been accumulating around 666
mhm,
that people automatically see something in conjunction with that, and it's like, ooh.
right.
And I'm just saying, yes, evil has, yeah, but look up angel meanings also.
Yes,
And the controllers have used numbers as a form of control,
yes, yes. Uh-huh. It's kind
because
of like
because their
brainwashing.
intent is not for good.
Right, yeah. It puts it into our subconscious to steer us. Yeah, beautiful. Um, and so, Michelle, why don't we wrap up for today? And what a lovely discussion. Thank you so much for
Yep,
joining me. I
yep, you're
appreciate
very
it.
welcome. Yeah.
And thank you.
And I
Thank you,
appreciate what
everyone.
you're doing, with the work with the ancestors and the biotuning and the intentions. I mean, everybody that has a gift and an awareness, our intentions are powerful. Our
They
abilities
are.
as individuals, even though we may not be aware of it, are important.
They are. And like someone in the chat is saying, can we join together the power in numbers? And definitely that's as whoever is in your realm or whoever you want to reach out for to or whatever is, wherever we're led to reach out for and to reach out to, um,
I
we have
don't
to
know.
take that as guidance to
I don't know
um,
if it's still a thing. I know it was several years ago. There's We Love Mass Meditations. Let me see if they're even still existing. Yeah, I mean, there are some mass meditation groups out there that connect to heal. Um, yeah, we love massmeditations.com
okay.
if you want to check that out.
All right, sounds great.
that's a lot of stuff on the grid on that one.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll end there today then. And again, thank you, Michelle, and many blessings on your work. I look forward to reading your next blog there to learn more. So,
thank you very much, Carla. Appreciate you.
Thank you. You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody.